Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Michelle Green, and today I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, and I'll let her introduce herself.
I'm Shivani.
Yes, so we are from Paramount's Audience Impact and Intelligence team, and we're really excited to, bring you a little over into our world today, if that's okay. So just to give you a little bit of rundown about our team studies all things social media, from the latest TikToks to the trending memes. We really decode insights across different business units, audiences, really creating thought leadership pieces, and we really focus on bringing a lot of future forward cultural work to the forefront. Okay, now that that's over, um, we're really excited today because we're going to be talking about a special audience segment, one that every marketer has its eye on. But before we get started, I'm looking in the audience because I kind of want to get a pulse check of where everyone is culturally. So, can anyone tell me what main character energy means? Anyone want to be brave? Anyone knows what? Want to take a guess at what main character
Oh,
energy
I see.
means?
I see a raised hand over there in the corner.
Yes, that's actually perfect, actually. So main character energy is basically an energy of someone being unapologetically themselves, someone that's confident. I would just like to say I think I'm personally channeling my main character energy today, so that's what we're going to go with. But Shivani, did I miss anything as far as like the definition?
No, I think you and her, we pretty much had it covered between the both of you. And it also happens to be a term that Gen Z came up with for romanticizing their lives, feeling like the star of the show, like we said. And that actually brings us right into the focus for today.
Yes, let's get started.
So we're going to use some of our insights to decode the discourse around Generation Z. That's right. We're talking about every boomer's nightmare, the envy of millennials. And if you're a marketer, this is probably an audience segment that keeps you up at night. So let's first define them in terms of age. They are born between 1995 to 2012, which makes them about 10 to 25 years old today. And that means that they are a group of adolescents, growing teenagers, and also fully grown adults. Not confusing at all. Some of them may even be in the room here with us right now, maybe, yes? Question mark? But they are taking over culture. And when we think about Gen Z, here are the first few things that come to mind, that they are posting on Be Real, which happened to be the #1 social app this summer. Proud to admit that I have at least 2 Gen Z friends who have posted me on their Be Real. I was there when it happened, so I'm officially the coolest. They are taking over pop culture with shows like Euphoria and movies like Bodies, 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 Do Revenge. There's so much content out there about Gen Z that you can watch now. They are running your social media channels, so if you needed a Gen Z on TikTok starter pack, just follow Duolingo because completely absurd, unhinged content, I think we all need. And there's also Maxwell Frost, who became the first 25-year-old to win a primary in his district, and he could even be elected to Congress as soon as this year. So we'll know more at the midterms. So clearly, Gen Z is this influential generation, is here to shake things up. But here's why it's really important to study them. They make up 1 in 5 of the US population. They are the most ethnically and racially diverse generation in history. They are set to unseat millennials as the most educated generation, and they make up for over $10.1 billion in spending power a year. No big deal.
They're literally taking over the world.
Yep. So even if they aren't a part of your current target audience, it is important to pay attention to them. And the one thing that we uncovered in our research is that Gen Z isn't a monolith, and we as marketers can be a teeny bit to blame for casting them as a monolith, for thinking of them as a group of entrepreneurs and activists with side hustles, and they all love astrology. But there is so much more to it than that. And this is an extremely multifaceted and nuanced generation, and we need to avoid thinking of them as just millennials 2.0. And we need to pay attention to how we're talking about them as well. So if we were to believe everything that we read, we'd think that Gen Z is the most anxious and yet the most hopeful, that they're the loneliest and the most suicidal, and yet at the same time, the most entrepreneurial and the most creative. So all these headlines paint this picture of a generation of contrast, but that's only giving us a sliver of that reality. And it's no wonder that Gen Z doesn't feel seen by brands. We found that 64% of Gen Z versus 45% of millennials say that brands don't understand people their age, which is actually an 11-point increase from 2020. And that's simply it, that we need to stop. We need to avoid thinking of them as millennials 2.0, and there is so much more to that picture. And the bottom line is, if you're a brand today in 2022, business can't go on as usual, especially when it comes to thinking about this generation. We need to understand them, their fully lived experiences, and undo the common tropes and often surface level narratives that can exist about Gen Z today. And we need to hit Command Z on all of that, hence the title of this study. And how do we do that, Michelle?
Yes. So I really kind of like to say that, the time is now for us to really undo these stereotypical narratives that are out there about Gen Z and really figure out how can we connect with them. So for this session, we're going to go through a few major misconceptions that are out there about Gen Z that we found in our Command Z study. And then we're going to decode what the insights actually are, what the reality is, right? So just want you to know that this is just a teaser and we have more of the themes more in depth in our full Command Z study. But for today's purposes, we're just going to talk about the major ones that are bubbling up in culture. So the first misconception is Gen Z doesn't want to work. So in the words of Kim K, it seems like no one wants to work these days. But the reality is that we're actually seeing that, they're reassessing their lives. And we're seeing that the concept of a dream job is actually in question. So in our Command Z study, we saw that 40% question if a dream jobs exist, and 22% think that they can have multiple dream jobs. So, we're seeing that that Gen Zers aren't going to overexhaust themselves with what we once known as hustle culture for previous generations, but instead may partake in things like what we're seeing in culture today as quietly quitting or putting it into the girl boss era. And I'm sure a lot of people in here probably are familiar with what the girl boss movement was. But, Gen Z is, taking fun of it to the destructive side of you can't be a girl boss and not gaslight and gatekeep at the same time. So in correlation with that, we're also seeing, like I said, this social movement called quietly quitting, and I'll play this video.
Hi, Jack.
Yeah, I have a really fun, exciting project for you to work on.
How many? Actually,
I really think you're gonna like it. DeAndre, what are you doing now?
oh, no. I'm gonna just write my job description in my email because you keep telling me to do things outside of it.
Right. Yeah. I think I'm totally going to just change my email signature to my job description every time someone asks me for something outside of it.
Definitely going into my email signature, yes. So what you just saw was DeAndre Brown, who's personally one of my favorite content creators out right now. But he was portraying quietly quitting, which is basically, Gen Z is not saying to actually quit your jobs. They're just saying that doing your job and just your job is simply enough and no more going above and beyond. Our next misconception is that Gen Z is being controlled by social media. Now, I'm looking at everyone's faces, and you're probably like, Michelle, this is not a misconception at all. I see your faces, but and you're probably like, okay, Gen Z has created things, the social houses like Hype House and Collab Crib, but stick with me, just stick with me. I want to challenge you a little bit on that. So what we're actually seeing is that Gen Z is manipulating the machine, right? So for Gen Z, they want to bypass content moderation and censorship with things like algo speak. And so with algo speak, what they're doing is they're replacing keywords that are banned or aren't brand safe with words, that can get past the algorithm. So yes, they probably get their news from places like TikTok instead of the New York Times, but instead of raging and going against the machine, they decided to play along with it. So we all know young people today, they're very blunt, they're very bold. So if they're having a conversation about mental health, they might say things like unalived instead of dead, or if they're referring to the pandemic, they might say things like Panini or Panda Express. But they'll use these things for their content not to be downranked. In addition to that, they're very smart. They know how to hack the algorithm. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about the shadow banning that was happening on a lot of social media apps that affected a lot of creators of color, and more specifically, a lot of Black creators. And so, Black creators on these on social media, they decided to, teach their followers how to hack the system by, watching the full video or commenting on their posts and resharing their posts. And it's just a way for a lot of young people to find safe spaces online. Okay, we almost through. So the third misconception is Gen Z is always looking to escape reality. And personally, reality is a lot right now, so I'm okay with this. But you have to think about it, right? Gen Z has been through a lot. The end of the pandemic, for lack of better words, they've been through recessions, inflations. Unfortunately, they're watching wars play out on live stream. It seems like there's this never ending chaos that they're going through. But what we're seeing in our Comanche study, the reality is that they're using reality as a playground where fact and fiction can both coexist, right? So when in our Comanche study, we saw that when we asked what they want from brands, they said 55% want brands to help them stay grounded in the real world, yet 45% want brands to help them escape. So there's this, juxtaposition, right? There's leaning in and leaning out, and there's never really one thing over the other. So we're also seeing, that they're embracing things like fake news and also fake history memes, like this one on the screen where someone was like, this is my great grandmother coming to Rio Grande to come to America, but in reality, Shivani.
That's just Kim K on vacation just after losing her diamond earrings.
Exactly. We know who this is. So like I said, also too, they're embracing this fake news, right? So we saw a great example of this is Birds on Real, which is like a social parody that's a social movement that's with a purpose. And this was founded by 24-year-old Peter McIndoe. And the concept of this is basically that birds aren't real and that they're actually government surveillance drones in disguise. So last fall, they protested outside of Twitter's headquarters, basically telling Twitter to take down their bird logo. So yeah.
I don't think I'll ever look at any bird logo the same way again. I feel like they might come for American Eagle next, and then Dove, and then Penguin Random House maybe.
Yeah, we don't know, but for this social movement and even just like the meme, we're basically seeing that Gen Zers are using satire and humor really to bring issues that they care about to the forefront and let people know about it. And so I'll pass it to Shivani.
Thanks, Michelle. So now we're going into our fourth misconception, which is that all Gen Z are multi-hyphenates. And by that, I mean that they are doing 300 different things personally and professionally at any given time. So you meet the typical Gen Zer and you expect them to be a DJ, model, blogger, podcaster, hybrid who also happens to make music in their bedroom. Or they're a bit like Jaden Smith, who is an actor, singer, rapper, philanthropist, all rolled into one. They can be multi-hyphenates, but it's not because they grew up in the gig economy or they like hopping around and changing their minds about what they want to do. They are multi-hyphenates because they're always living life in beta mode. And by that, we mean that they are not just growing up with technology, that they are adopting to the culture of technology, so much so that they take on the attributes of the tech that they have grown up with. We found that 93% of Gen Z wish that they could adopt a feature from their phone for themselves, with almost 1 in 2 saying that they'd want more processing power. So getting more mental storage or upgrading or charging their batteries. Personally, I relate to wanting to upgrade my operating system. I feel like we all need it at this point. And they are also soft launching on social media. So they will soft launch their boyfriends and their babies by leaving a trail of clues on their personal accounts. It kind of feels like a product drop. I don't know if you've seen this iconic photo posted by Kourtney Kardashian of her hands intertwined with someone else's hands to announce her relationship with Travis Barker. But there's no Travis Barker in it. It's the hint of a relationship. And I know this isn't strictly Gen Z, but it is definitely giving Gen Z soft launch. Have you soft launched anything yet, Michelle?
No, I just go straight to it. I just hard launch. I don't do any soft launch.
Hard
I'm not
launch.
this part of Gen Z, no.
Just hard launch. That's another way to do it. And Gen Z is also beta testing their beliefs. So Polemics is the name of a social platform that is currently invite only, and it's designed exclusively for high school and college age students to debate hot button issues with each other, and especially with people with opposing viewpoints. So they aren't just putting their identities to the test, they are putting their values and beliefs to the test. And in that way, so what we learned in the previous slide is that they are seeing their lives as open source code, right? Like the beta life is forever. And going into our fifth and final misconception is that Gen Z hates brands. And this is something that we read about once in a while. This is probably every marketer's nightmare as well. One day you wake up and you have to put out a bunch of fires. But Gen Z it's not that they are skeptical of brands, it's just that they have different expectations from brands, and they expect brands to change it up. So whether it's being a bit more experimental with their brand equity and adapting to culture, or just making modifications to their brand and leveling up, they do. We found that only 22% want a brand to be true to their legacy, which means over 3/4 of Gen Z are open to brands experimenting with their identities. We love using this example from KFC in 2020 at the start of the pandemic. They wanted to drop the finger licking good tagline because obviously having something that's finger licking good during a raging play was not savory or cool. But instead of coming up with a new tagline, they decided to come up with a campaign where they just incorporate famous taglines from different brands. So Nike's Just Do It, or MasterCard's Priceless, or Snickers, You're Not You When You're Hungry. They all kind of make sense for fried chicken, so it worked. And if 54%, right, are saying that they appreciate it when brands connect with them in new and innovative ways, then it's time to switch it up. And remember that Gen Z likes living life in beta, so why not do it yourself? So that was a lot, and we learned a lot, and we wanted to give you the Spark Notes version of what we just went through. So the Great Resignation is actually the Great Reassessment. Gen Z aren't controlled by, but they are manipulating the machine. They aren't trying to escape from reality, but they are ready to make reality their playground. And it's not about living like multi-hyphenates, but really just about treating yourself as though you're living life in beta and testing your identities. And they're not actually brand averse, but just open to new brand experiences. So hopefully that was a fun start to your morning and you feel a bit more caught up on Gen Z. And as brand innovators, you probably want to take a tip or two from Gen Z and embrace that main character energy. Just focus on you and be the most unapologetic and confident version of your brand.
Yes, so we are wrapping up here, and just wanted to note, like I mentioned in the beginning, we have a full-length Command Z study that talks about the themes that we went over today and more in depth. So if your brand wants to be like Billie Eilish and keep your life in beta, if your brand wants to challenge the system like Lil Nas X, like we see all the time, we have in our full study, and we have full-length interviews from the Gen Zers that we saw across the country. On your seats, you'll see that we have a Command Z zine, and that actually goes more in depth about the insights and the data that we collected while observing Gen Z and also in our Command Z study. So yes, I would just like to wrap up with that. And just so you know, our next session from our team will be on Thursday, and our team will be discussing LGBTQ plus in America. Same time, same place, so come back. Thank you all.